I think the way we'll do this is going to be a blend of a paper and some presentations of some studies that we've done recently on the platform livelihoods of youth living with disabilities. And then we're going to turn it into a discussion because we've got so many representatives from the studies we've done as a collection here with us today. So I'm going to start by asking each person to take the microphone quickly and describe themselves and maybe the institutions that they are representing. I didn't get to show the logo slide. And then we can move into the presentation from there. And we might be waiting for just a moment for the slides. Maybe in the meantime, Irene, if you want to get us started.
Can you hear me? Yeah, great. My name is Irene Barikirika. I'm the founder and executive director of inABLE. I'm also here representing my startup, which is called Technoprice Global, that also participated in this part of the project. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, the clicker doesn't seem to work, but we'll figure this out. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you. My name is Hélène. I am a more or less white woman of about in my late 30s. And I've been working with Caribou Digital for the last 5 years. I lead the learning partnership program that Caribou Digital has with the MasterCard Foundation and under which this study sits. Yeah, looking forward to this discussion. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone. My name is Peter Okeo. I'm from Technoprice Global. I'm the program manager and also handling the technical bit for Technoprice. So we also participated in this and we are ready to give our presentation. Thank you.
Good morning everyone. My name is Julius Bura. I'm advocacy officer at inABLE. And I'd say this was an eye-opener of our research because I was part of the group and we did user testing and also accessibility for different platforms. So happy to speak on that. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, good morning everyone. My name is James Angoe. I'm medium height, black African man, wearing spectacles. I love brown, so I have a brown jacket and brown trousers. Yeah, so I lead the research in inABLE, and that's what we'll be speaking about. And I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
James, can I have that? And one other, actually 2 other bits of context before we get going. The first is, I forgot, I'm also from Caribou Digital, but I'm not talking today, I'm just moderating. And the second is, I am hopeful that we can gather and receive questions from the audience, both here and remotely. There's a chat function on Hopin, and I will try, I'm not being rude by having my phone in my hand here. I'm trying to get to see the questions as they come in. If I get that link by the end of the conversation, I will include those. If not, I'm going to need somebody to raise their hands and ask the questions on behalf of people who are joining remotely. But we'll see how that goes as we get into the conversation part of it. And from there, Irene, would you like to say a few words to kick us off?
So this project that we worked on was very, very interesting, and you'll be hearing most of the details from everyone. And it's really about trying to make sure that all these digital applications that we're using to provide services are actually inclusive. And one thing I'd like to talk about is the importance of user experience research or usability studies. It's important to make sure that the end users give feedback about their experience of the product that you've designed or you've developed before it goes out into the market. And we actually went out and did a usability study on existing products that we're going to talk about today. And what we found is that most of them were not functional. So the experience for those with disabilities was frustrating. If anything, they preferred not to use those platforms. So it's important to understand the importance of having all the requirements from all types of users, a diverse group of people, not just thinking about people who are sighted. You have to know there's going to be deaf people using my platform. There's going to be people with limited use of their upper limbs. You're going to have people who are low vision, people who are blind, people who are autistic, just different types. But how do they respond to different types of technologies or the type of technology that you're developing? You are not going to understand that unless you have them in the room, unless you have them figuring out the application or giving you feedback. You can get all the equipment you want. It can be the best looking application, the most beautiful, but if you don't include the users, if you don't give them a chance, then you will not get the information you need. In this case, we actually got them to use the product. We observed, we documented, we asked them to share what they think. So that's very critical. The other piece we also did is we did accessibility testing. When you do accessibility testing, it's based on the global, on the web content accessibility guidelines. And fortunately, if you're Kenyan, so for those who are not Kenyan, there's at least the web content accessibility guidelines that you can work with. For those who are Kenyans, we do have a technical document, the Kenya Standard on Digital Accessibility for ICT Products and Services. So you do have a guideline that can help you in the development process. So we did the accessibility testing. We followed all the technical requirements. And these applications, most of them did not perform well. And there's a difference between usability, because I'm showing you the use, then accessibility is really following the technical requirements to make sure that you cater to the blind, you cater to the deaf based on their needs. And what is important to note is something can actually be fully accessible, but it's not usable. So it's important to do both so that you make sure even if accessibility is perfect, we want to make sure that someone is not going through 10 steps to just sign up for your application. Mm-hmm. Those 10 steps can be reduced to 2 steps, right? And we also want to make sure if there's a PIN number being sent or a code being sent to my phone, once I sign up, it doesn't come to me 2 days later. It needs to come through within a matter of seconds. And that's stuff that we found, and that's important to note, that there's the usability and there's the accessibility of the product. Those are two very different things, but they both contribute to the performance of the application that you have. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Irene. Okay, so taking a little step back, first of all, to tell you a little bit about what we mean by platform livelihoods. So this study is a first exploration into youth with disabilities and how they experience platforms and how they use platforms to earn a living. How we came to this terminology, if we take a step back 5 years ago, without giving a whole download of the history, Caribou Digital started looking into how young people use digital platforms, and that is both social media and e-commerce platforms, in order to make a living. The studies originated in Kenya, so most of the work we have conducted has been in Kenya, and now we're starting to look at Ghana, Nigeria, and more recently in Senegal. So with that in mind, the research has tried to collect information and really speak with young people and how they use platforms to make a living. And through these experiences and through their voice, we try to interrogate whether platform livelihoods or whether platforms can provide dignified and fulfilling work to young people. With that in mind, stepping a few years later in 2021, so this study has been running for almost 2 years now, a year and a half. At the end of 2021, we kicked off our research with inABLE. As I think you may have seen from the logos, we combine our respective expertise from inABLE Technoprise that are expert in the disability sector, and ourselves at Caribou Digital that are experts, or sort of experts, I suppose, in the digital landscaping and digital economies, and together tried to interrogate how young people between 18 and 35 years old were using digital platforms for their livelihoods. And so what you're going to hear about today is whether or not, indeed, young people are using digital platforms for their livelihoods. And yeah, with that in mind, hopefully I've covered a little bit of the background to give you an insight into what we're going to be hearing today. So I don't know.
Yeah, so I'll just take you through what methodology
I'm so sorry. There's a 30-second video. Paul, would you be willing to put it on? Thank you very much. Sorry, James.
What are the experiences of youth with disabilities as they use digital platforms to earn a living?
No one knows that you're disabled, and that means that no one will judge you. It also implies that no one will favor you. It's your skills here that's likely to save you.
They correlate to give us equal.
There's nothing that is impossible to do.
Brought to you by MasterCard Foundation, Caribou Digital, and inABLE.
So very quickly, this is a 30-second teaser of 6 individuals with different disabilities that have participated in our research. I'm sorry you couldn't see the headers on the subtitles on the video, but hopefully that was understandable. Over to you, James.
Yeah. So I'll just take you through the methodology, and that's one of the things we did. It was an interesting study in the sense that when we began the process, as Helene has indicated, we thought, 6 months will be done with it. The usual way you plan. But we co-created this process, and therefore, along the journey, we would find challenges. Like the first challenge we met was the whole challenge of recruitment. Where these young people who are doing work on using digital platforms. So getting those young people was not really easy. We collaborated with the National Council of Persons with Disability. We worked with the community groups, the WhatsApp groups and other groups, Facebook groups within the different communities. And through that process, it was so difficult just getting persons who were working on this. But we were able, that meant that what we had planned for 3 weeks ended up being 3 months, just doing the recruitment of the specific target group, because we wanted to be very specific on what we want. We wanted the experiences for those that have used the platforms. So that was one. So during that period, we did doing the literature review, trying to find out what are the documents, and interestingly enough, we couldn't get, that's why we are saying this is exploratory. The method that we are using is exploratory. We couldn't get literature in Africa, in the context of Kenya, on these specific subjects. And therefore, that was the first, basically, process we went through. But then we were able to get the different persons with disability, the young persons with disability, and we conducted a survey. So from the survey, we got the issues, we unearthed the issues that we needed to follow up, which we did with the focus group discussion and the in-depth interviews. And through that, we now selected the groups that were, the participants that now came into the disability testing and compliance testing that Irene has mentioned about. Then after that, we now hold self-shot videos. These were just videos done by the same young people, and you've seen just the teaser. We have full videos with them that they have shot themselves. Their days conducting their business, and they are online. We'll be sharing the link at the end of this session, the links of that. But they are online videos talking about what is their day, just trying to earn a living using the platform, the digital platforms. And then finally we had a reflective piece led by Caribou on that process, that journey. What is our reflections? Because there's nothing that we could find that was already there. So what are our reflections based on the exploratory or foundational research that we've gotten, and that can help us move to the next level of implementation. So what are some of the findings we got? In terms of those who were interested in numbers, we were able to do 148 in the terms of the survey. Pretty much equally split, around 82 to 65 to 66. Female were 66, male were 82, around that in terms of the survey. And then the whole participants was 180. That's why, but what we found was that most of the participants were in their mid to early 20s. They were educated and confident, because you are putting yourself out on the online space. So that confidence bit was really an important ingredient in terms of ensuring that they participate. And we noted that that majority, of course, you had to have devices, and that was one of the, and we'll be getting into the barriers later on, but you had to have digital devices that are accessible to you, and those are some of the things that we got. Well, what we noted is also in terms of the platforms that they used. When we started out, we went with the assumption. The assumption was that now we have the e-commerce platforms, and they have end-to-end. You are able to find from the platform what is it that from the uploading of the whatever you are selling to getting it to the market, end to end, whereby even the delivery to the buyer was there. But when we asked them which platforms are you using in the initial stages, we noted that most of them were not doing e-commerce platforms. They were using social commerce or social platforms. So we tweaked our study. Those are part of the things that we tweaked our study, because we had gone with the assumption that we have these platforms that are there, e-commerce platforms that people are selling on, but we noted that it was not. So, for example, 90%, actually 1% were in the e-commerce platforms. Only 1%. In Kenya, we talk about the Gigi. We talk about Jumia, which again is in various places, with Pigiami, Kilimall. Only 1% of the young persons were using those platforms. Most of them were using, 90% were using the social media. The WhatsApp, the Facebook were the majority. Like for example, almost 83 to 86% were using WhatsApp as their online platform, with another around 60% using the Facebook. So that tweaked our study, and we now focused our survey, we focused our qualitative, the in-depth interviews, the focus group discussions on the social media platforms and how they use them. And we found that most of those businesses for these young persons with disabilities were sole proprietorship, they depended on family and friends for support. For example, when delivery of the, because now it was a social media platform, it means that the delivery was not happening, because in the e-commerce platform there's a process of delivery, but that was not. So they depend on the different family members to deliver their products. And what we noted is that the earnings were limited. Oftentimes you find that over almost close to 80% were earning around $150 to that of that amount from the platform per month, $150 per month. But what was interesting is that we found that even though it was that amount, it was very self-fulfilling that you are able to earn on your own. Even if it is just $150, you are able to earn that amount on your own. And that was really something that was really empowering to the young people. Interesting enough was that the female young persons with disability were more likely to be satisfied with that income. So the independence that was there, the flexibility that was there with earning and being able to earn while you are home, you were able to cater for your other duties. So it was more satisfying as opposed to the male young persons with disability. They felt that, that was not much. Even though the male, of course, were earning more. You look at the $150 to around $200, the above $150 to $200, there were more male. There were more male, actually substantially more male. In almost 1 in 5 men were earning between $150 to $200 compared to 1 in 10 female. But the female were more satisfied with whatever they were earning compared to the male. Then when you come to the applications, one of the challenges that they kept on talking about was they preferred applications that were simple, that were accessible and familiar. Because of the issues that came around stigmatization, they would prefer being in a space that they are safe, that they are not they are not discriminated against, and therefore that's the reason they were in their WhatsApp groups, references, and so on and so forth. So the spaces were more familiar to them. It was simple, just to reference the other e-commerce. They found the e-commerce sites to be very complicated. They were not simple enough for them, and therefore they would prefer the WhatsApps and the Facebooks because they were simple, they were accessible, and again now the familiarity. But those now who are more self-confident will now reach out to Facebook because they now want to expand their reach, because they now go to Facebook where now you are more exposed there, and the whole issues now come around the challenges of being exposed there. We noted that the other issue, just before I move to the disability and accessibility testing, was the whole issue of the dependence. The dependence across the different disabilities. You would find that those the visually impaired, because we targeted 3 disabilities specifically: visual impairment of the blind, hearing impaired, persons with hearing impairment, and those with physical challenges. And across all of them, the issue of dependence was there because of delivery, because of the use of the commerce. They needed to depend on somebody to deliver. If they exposed themselves, a challenge arose. Now you will find that they will be taken advantage of. If they went themselves to deliver, you would find that they will be taken advantage of. For example, because most of what they were selling were either goods such as clothes, foodstuffs, and you're also giving services. So assuming it was a pair of clothes that you ordered online and through the WhatsApp and you are going to deliver, and it's a person who is visually impaired, then there will be judgment that now you are visually impaired. How sure this is good quality because you are visually impaired? No. So that issue now brings that now they will be taken care of, advantage of, perhaps they will not be paid on time, they will be delayed. So there were a lot of issues just when they reveal themselves to the community or to the buyers. The challenge now became on they start the issues of come around them being stigmatized. Yeah, so I'll let my colleagues also just speak up and talk about issues of disability and accessibility. My colleague Peter.
Thank you, James. So as James said, I think we are going to share more in terms of what failed, why they find it very difficult to use the online selling platforms, as he has mentioned. So from our side as Technoprice, we did 2 studies. One was usability, and second one was accessibility, which also we call compliance testing reports. So when it comes to usability, we engage different individuals with different disabilities, where we had users who are deaf, totally blind, and also with mobility issues. And then, of course, as I mentioned, we had 3 platforms which we sampled. That was Junior, Gigi, and PGM. So we wanted to see how easy are the platforms usable for this particular group of individuals. So to do that, we came up with what we call use cases or scenarios in testing. Just to break it down, is is you just identify a few areas, you map out, you don't test everything in those applications. So we scripted a few use cases, whereby one, we had the sign-up process or registration. We wanted to see how easy is it for this particular individual to register on these 3 platforms successfully. What I mean by successfully is you, by the time you download the application and by the time now it's ready for use, you get like verification code, make sure that everything is good. And then secondly, after sign-up process, we also came up with uploading product, because you want to sell. So my app is ready for use. So how do I upload my product? I have a clothes that I want to sell on Jumia. They usually find those products with all the descriptions. So how easy was that for them to do? And then the third one was actually setting up payment method, because we are selling. We just need to include our payment method. How will users be able to, buyers be able to pay for the product, reach the seller and all that. And then of course, again, we had the contact. How are you going to be contacted on all these platforms? Then eventually we had logout. So once you sign up and then you, of course, log out once you're done. So we subjected all these use cases to these individuals, and apparently a number of them failed the usability test. Basically, usability, we don't give them like a procedure to follow. It's simply how usable is the app or the application to them, you get. So where we had a lot of issues was actually uploading a product once they sign up, which we didn't have much issues, but uploading a product failed across all the tests. That is usability and also accessibility, the technical report. So the reason being, in most of why this failed, you find that there are so many obstacles that they face. So as long as you're not able to upload a product, that simply means you can't sell. We all agree on that. So that was one of the biggest challenges that they face. So the biggest question would be, what made these platforms difficult for them to be able to upload a product? So you find that product developers or people who design these products, they did this without accessibility in mind. They focus more on people who are sighted, who don't have much issues when it comes to screen reader software, for example, that is being used by the visually impaired individuals. So you find that there are so many buttons. You bump onto something like unlabeled, you have no idea what that is, so you can't actually proceed, you get. So you don't know whether that is an interactive element or whatever it is. So that is now from the usability angle. And then we also have, I think the easiest for them was somehow setting up the payment method and also the contact, because you just need to put your phone number, email, and all that. And then logout, we also had a few issues with the buttons not having roles. That's a bit technical. Roles is basically, is this button interactive? Whatever interactive, it means something that is clickable in short. But for them, you see now they don't click, they just double tap and then they activate the button. So these are some of the issues that we find when it comes to usability. And then we subjected the same scenarios or use cases to now the technical testing, which we call compliance accessibility testing. This is subjected to some guidelines which users testers are supposed to follow, and this is basically done by testers who are sighted, so that they're able to also use some certain tools. So apparently all these use cases or scenarios failed in all these tests. So in short, it means these 3 platforms, which is now Jumia, Gigi, and PGME, are unusable to the group of individuals I've mentioned. Yes, so that is what we had so far. So not unless there is any question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Irene's going to say a word or two here.
Oh, Julius, you want to go? I go.
Oh yeah. So for me, I was using the apps from lived experience. As a blind person, when it comes to all these beautiful apps, and this came as a realization during the pandemic when everyone was using the platforms heavily because we couldn't get out of the houses. And you find that all these e-commerce platforms, they their focus is mostly on traffic and numbers. So even when we started complaining on how unusable they are and inaccessible they are, the feedback we used to get is, many other people use it without having issues. And then what they fail to understand is that they are users of the platforms with disabilities. And if we look at the case studies that we had, persons with disabilities were depending on these apps to actually earn a living. So these are self-employed persons, and for them to actually turn to social media, it means that the platforms themselves haven't brought accessibility as a priority in the design phase and also in the delivery and also the services. So it's very difficult to convince someone who's looking at profits over impact. And when you try bring the issue of, accessibility should be from the ground up, because when you start creating solutions, once you've already created the app or the platform, then it becomes expensive. Then now even the designers themselves, they start looking at cost implication. They start looking at, why am I even doing this for only 2 blind guys who will be using the app? So it's really a matter of being marginalized. And the reason why even persons with disabilities got comfort using social media to push their products is because social media has gotten to a point where it's becoming more inclusive. We have alt text when it comes to social media across, and when you're posting a product and you want, and if you look at the e-commerce platforms that we're talking about, you find that they are they're heavy on image and also graphical work, because you need to show what you're selling. And mostly when you're uploading, and I use social media a lot, so when I'm uploading and I'm putting a photo and I put the alt text, it means someone who's blind who will come across the photo, the screen reader will grab the alt text and read for the person. So when I'm scrolling through, and I've actually, we've tried even as inABLE to educate people, we've held a Twitter space, an Instagram live, and also a Facebook live, to just tell people that, whatever you're posting, it's very beautiful, and it doesn't hurt to actually put alt text so that blind people and low vision people, if they can't really get what the image is communicating, then they can interact with the alt text and actually even engage with your products and even ask pertinent questions. If I'm getting to Junior to buy something really fast, I can't do that because I have to depend on Peter or someone else to read for me. Sometimes these products that we buy, they are very personal and private, and when I surrender my independence to depend on someone else, then I'm compromising on my privacy as well. So when you can imagine if I'm a user from the other end, what happens when I'm the person who's actually pushing a business using the platform? It becomes very difficult, and as Peter has said, and I like the fact that we watched a video of someone with a disability saying, how they wanted to use the digital assets. And all these assets, and the reason why inABLE and Inclusive Africa advocates for digital accessibility, the reason even why Caribou brought the study to understand why persons with disabilities are not using the platforms that are available to everyone for use, then it goes down to having everyone as part of your design, having everyone to interact with your products and services in an equal manner. Because if you don't put the accessibility as a priority, and assistive technology and accessibility actually, they work together. So you can't have one without having to depend on the other. So all these platforms, for them to be inclusive, they need to look at the population and also bring everyone on board, because if you're giving a product to the public, then you need also for different groups, and persons with disabilities are part of these groups, to actually even give you feedback on what you need to consider when you're bringing the infrastructure of the platform, the app, to make sure that you build tech for all. Thank you.
Yeah, I know we were using a bit of some technical terms, but I'm glad Julius picked up a bit of it. I want to talk about alt text, what he's talking about. I know I was looking at people and it's a bit confusing. Alt text is really alternative text. It's really a description. So if you're posting an image of anything, you're able to actually put a description of that content, of whatever it is. And think about it that if you don't describe that image, the person using a screen reader will not be able to know what it is. And you cannot be able to see alt text with your naked eye. That's actually picked up by the screen reader. So even if you looked at it, you wouldn't see any difference. Okay, but someone who's blind who's using a screen reader will pick it up. Now, the other piece I think he talked about was naming buttons. Yes, so let me maybe simplify this. Think about when you go online and you're applying for something. When you get to the end, there's a submit button. What do? You click on it to submit, correct? So what he was trying to describe is when persons with disabilities are using these applications, if they get to that place for submit, it's blank. So what happens? They are lost. You don't know, do I go forward? Do I go to the top? They can't click enter, they can't click anything. So that means that whole process is nullified. But what we are saying is, if you follow the global accessibility guidelines, you can make sure that the submit button has alternative text so that when someone who's blind gets to that space, is able to know, yes, now it's time to submit. But even after they submit, they have to receive a confirmation email saying, most of the time we receive confirmation emails, we see them. But when most people who are blind don't receive the email, it doesn't say anything. So they sit here, they sit there and just wait. What am I waiting for? To receive a confirmation that the process was successful. So, but all that is very technical, so I was just trying to bring it home. But if you follow the global content accessibility guidelines, you can be able to achieve some of that. Thank you.
Paul, do you mind going to the next slide because the clicker is not working? Thank you very much. Okay, so fantastic, presentations from everybody. Effectively, this next slide is really summarizing and coming back to everything that has been said mostly. So I'll try to be quite brief. So we have 5 reflections that came through from this research. The first one is around the fact that one thing we realized quite quickly in our study was that, in principle, this idea that you can go online and be independent and start making a living using social media is actually not fully true. Very often, people with disabilities need assistance, as Julius has mentioned. So this independence on social media or on e-commerce platforms was one of the first things we understood. And therefore, the question it leads to is, what is that cost? What does it cost for a person with disability to have this support, to have this aid? And how does that impact their livelihoods? So this is a topic we talk about with people with disabilities. People without disabilities, in prior research we have done, we've identified that what we call hidden collaborations do exist on platforms. And so there's often another person helping you. But in this particular case, with people with disabilities, this element, this finding was quite pregnant and quite strong. The second one is, we spoke about the social commerce versus e-commerce. And the second point says that sellers often start on e-commerce, but also stay in e-commerce. And what this means is that, yes, social commerce is a particularly interesting platform because of how much easier it is to use any e-commerce platforms, how much more familiar people are and therefore trust it more. However, as James has mentioned, there is this closing the deal issue. When you are on social media, just to bring back this point around, imagine you're selling anything, an umbrella on social media, and you do all the transaction, you do your messaging, or you find a way to talk back with an individual, and then comes the transaction point, and you need to actually physically go and meet that person. And you need to deliver it, and you need to be paid. And those two elements are particularly difficult. And that's one thing where we question whether or not, in addition to what social commerce platform provides, what is the opportunity for e-commerce platforms to come in and step in order to palliate to this issue of delivery and transaction, which is where people with disabilities have mentioned they face the most discrimination, and B, the most difficulties. So this is a second point that we wanted to highlight. A third point, which really is linked to it, and Julius spoke about it so beautifully, really, around privacy and disclosure. I don't know if you heard that sentence in this teaser video, but something that this gentleman, Adika, speaks about. He says, on platforms, no one will see you, and I'm paraphrasing terribly here, but it's only your skills that will save you. And so you don't have any positive discrimination, say, in this particular case. So there is this balance of privacy and disclosure on social media, and how do you support people with disabilities, and again, how maybe e-commerce platforms have a role to play and a responsibility here. Fourth point is, again, something that has been touched upon by James in particular, is at the beginning of our research, we wanted to understand how women with disabilities have different experiences from men with disabilities. And it turned out that despite having an equal sample, almost 50-50, 62, we weren't able to find that out. So this is a big question mark for us, in particular because we have, as Caribou Digital, done other research with other partners, in particular in Kenya, with our partner Kala, on this topic, and have found that women women in general working on platforms have different challenges from men working on social commerce and e-commerce platforms. Just to finalize on this particular point, James mentioned that women felt more fulfilled by the work they were doing on social commerce, even though they earned less than men. And while we don't have an answer to why that is, the other research I've mentioned suggests that perhaps one element that has come through that women seem to privilege with online work is flexibility, in that a woman can stay at home and be able to work from home, as well as do what may be her responsibility in certain contexts with household chores and so on. It's not to say that this is not a double-edged sword, because that does mean that women do twice the work. And finally, but not least, we want to explore how platforms, and in particular e-commerce platforms, can be workplaces, the way that an office is a workplace. And this is something that when we did our research, I think we were aspiring to, and this is where we thought there would be strong recommendations to go towards asking e-commerce platforms, in particular in markets where formal employment is less, how do e-commerce platforms provide formal work and not just informal social selling? So platforms as workplaces was a thing we were debating. And just a final thing, Paul, sorry, could you do the last slide? Paul, thank you so much. Thank you very much. in terms of path aheads, and I think we can all speak to this well, but there are three elements, three particular areas we would like to discuss and get your thoughts on. One is on platform design, which comes out very strongly in our research. The second is on research. I know that doing more research for the sake of research is not what we're talking about, but as you've already heard, we're, for instance, on the topic of women, but there's also all sorts of different aspects that we would like to explore more and do more research on, and policy. So maybe I'll actually hand it over to James or Julius to talk about platform design and what you think would be helpful, or policy. Do you want?
Yeah, we have just a couple minutes left, but it would be good to reflect on this as one of our last things. So James, if you could do that.
Yeah, so I'll just mention a couple of issues on the three, just quickly. Yeah, the issue of co-design, basically platform design, I think over and over in the conference has come out that it is important include them from the beginning, not at the end. You know, oftentimes it has been an afterthought. You know, accessibility or inclusion comes after an afterthought. So that ensuring that there's co-design was really critical, because some of the things that were being brought out were just, you know, simple issues. Like, for example, the young people with the hearing impairment or the deaf, they would sign on WhatsApp, and that's the reason why they would prefer it. You know, I can be able to sign on WhatsApp and sell my, sell my product through signing up. Or the young people with blind say, I'll send up a voice note. So, see, those are elements that can be incorporated in the e-commerce platforms, and then make it very easy, so that there's no, the issue of selling becomes very easy on the other end, because you're selling a voice note, you have incorporated that within your platform, which I believe is something that can be done. Coming to research, yes, the issue of just trying to get the intersectionality, because we believe in our study, the basic issue of just having to be able to sell on the platform seemed to the gender issue was not coming out, because the disability factor was a bit more pronounced. So the community, there was, because we are persons with disability, you know, it was more of an issue as opposed to gender. But we believe there are more issues that underlying that can be unearthed from that. And then in terms of policy, I know in Kenya, as Irene indicated earlier on, there's been some advancement in terms of trying to get standards, but which I think is something that should be replicated even in other countries, so that we have policy direction on issues of standards, and there's compliance. The government should be the first leading, so that when you come to the corporates, you are borrowing the example from the government, and that's something that I would basically be trying to follow up, and we are already, as inABLE, trying to follow through, and there'll be a session, I think, in the afternoon around what is happening on the implementation of the standards. Thank you.
Thanks. Can we show the last slide just with the thank you, if it's there? So just as we get into wrap up, let me just say this, that there is a URL which is lengthy. It's platformlivelihoods.com, platforms, youth, and disabilities. Nobody's going to be able to spell that. We will share that around. All of that work is now published and available. The videos, which are fantastic first-person shot videos, the technical reports, the survey results, and the reflections essays are all out there to extend on what the speakers have shared with us today. inABLE and Technoprize are here to answer more questions throughout the conference. We're all available online and findable if people have more questions. I know we're running up on time. I got that horrible little note that comes in that says, we must keep the show rolling. So I'm reluctant to do this because we didn't get any questions from people, but we have to wrap, don't we? We have to wrap. I must apologize to the audience who's been so patient. I must thank our speakers for their comments and reflections today, and hope that the conversation will continue. Can we do one? I know people have two questions. Can I read, can brief questions, 1 and 2? So go ahead.
I'm from Somalia.
Mm-hmm.
Where there is not much opportunity for young people with disabilities, or may not even exist in such platforms. So, the agency that I am from, Somalia, has one of the main priorities is to improve the skills and the ability of technical knowledge of young people with disabilities in order to have them access to jobs. And so my question is, I think all of you are from, you have some knowledge or experience in this platform, and I would like to have one of you or some of you to advise me to know more about the accessibility of these platforms. So when I go back to home, I can help young people with disabilities and help them to connect with this platform so that may lead them to have access to employment or other opportunities. Thank you.
So let's take the other question, and maybe it'll overlap, and then we can get a final word from our panelists. Go ahead over there.
Thank you very much. My name is Tadia. I work for the MasterCard Foundation. I am very fascinated by the distinction between the social platforms and e-commerce. And I'm wondering whether there's a greater intensity in the vulnerability, in how vulnerable people with disability are on either of these platforms, both in terms, particularly from the point of view of exploitation and safeguarding.
So there's two questions. There's one on sort of the experience of selling and earning a living. It's not a job in the sense that you get a paycheck. It's a livelihood in the sense you sell to earn a living. There's another question about the relative experiences if you're using a formal e-commerce platform versus informally selling via social media, which we might want to amplify. And then also the gentleman from Somalia had the questions about the differences in the accessibility of the formal platforms versus the informal platforms as well. I think it's a nice place to wrap up on if people have a remark or two on this.
I'll kick off because I'm the less interesting person, but I'm really glad you bring up skills. This is definitely an area that, in fact, in our research itself, we identified a gap as well, in particular around onboarding and training people with disabilities on how do they onboard on e-commerce platforms and social, in particular on e-commerce platforms. Effectively, there's still a lot of work to be done. We think that building curriculums that would, in training programs, include how young people who want to access formal employment can leverage social media and e-commerce platforms is definitely something that we've put as our path forward. So skills is definitely a strong question. We, right now, do not have formal curriculums to provide besides the research, which I hope you'll read and get some insights from to start. But thanks for bringing up skills. Very important.
I'd like to touch on the vulnerability of using social media, persons with disabilities versus using e-commerce. So when you're using e-commerce, of course it's a business, so you don't have your personal data there. And when you're using social media, you'll find that sometimes, and I'm not saying this happens a lot, but even for the test subjects that we had, they were complaining of personal safety, because if you're, say for example, you're visually impaired, you've given your number to a customer, or you've at one point or another used WhatsApp to communicate with the client. Sometimes you'd find that when the client actually discovers of your disability, they'd like to take advantage. That is stealing, and this has happened a lot because you go and like how Helene talked about closing the deal. So you go close the deal, and the person realizes this person is actually blind, and they follow you back home, and they take all the proceeds. So they let you like do your business the whole day, and actually mark you as a target. And also, like, I know we have other ways of spying on people using social media. Of course, it's not ethical. And I would say persons with disabilities have become victims of, even like other horrendous acts of people trying to take advantage of their disability because, one, they think they don't have a voice. Number two, they think they can get away with it. And persons with disabilities, yeah.
I'll give you 30 seconds.
Okay, sorry. So yeah, there's a lot of vulnerability when it comes to the social media, and that's why we're advocating for accessibility on the e-commerce so that persons with disabilities can, trade with dignity and also earn a living like anyone else. Equality.